So welcome to the Mission Zero Academy webinar on the green claims and new packaging rules. My name is Kaisa. I lead on the Mission Zero Academy. And we have been getting recently a lot of questions of what's changing in the EU policy in terms of green claims and packaging. And we thought that it's the best idea to answer all these questions by inviting an expert to explain to us. And here we are. We have Margaux Le Gallou from ECOS speaking to us today and sharing her expertise on the topic. Welcome, Margaux. We're very happy to have you here. Thank you for taking the time and sharing the expertise with us today. Would you like to start by introducing who you are and what you do, and we go from there?
All right, well, thank you. So as mentioned, I work for the Environmental Coalition on Standards. So we are an international NGO. We work on environmental topics. We're membership-based, so we are basically a network of about 57 environmental NGOs across the world, mostly in Europe. And our focus is on standardization and the technical aspects of environmental legislation. So we really look into the nitty-gritty detail of how do you measure recycled content, what exactly should go in your life cycle assessment, and these sort of things. Myself, I work in the environmental transparency team, and my main focus is on green claims. So environmental information towards consumers, between businesses. So that's what I focus on. Today, I will be also talking a little bit about packaging rules. So I will tell you what are the main measures when it comes to the hotels and restaurants and cafes. Now, if you have a lot of questions in this file, just as a disclaimer, I might not have all of the answers. But when it comes to green claims, normally you should be covered.
Great, thank you. And yeah, please feel free to drop your questions at any time, either in the chat or in the Q&A function, so we can pick them up on the way to be answered. So let's get started. First of all, why are we even talking about green claims? Like, why is it such an issue that the EU needs to regulate that, and what's kind of the background on it?
So I think that's kind of an understanding from everyone that there is now a lot of green marketing. So a lot of companies saying that their product is more sustainable, has less impact on the environment. The issue that this also means there is a lot of greenwashing. So people who make either vague, unsubstantiated, unreliable, or even false claims on the credentials of their products or of their company. And actually, the Commission conducted some investigations over the years, and there was one especially in 2020 that looked at environmental claim and showed that basically half of them are either not substantiated or they're vague. So really, this shows like the amount of information. One claim out of two is just not giving you the information you should receive, and it might actually be completely misleading. So there is really a big issue with the kind of information that we see on the market. And this has real world consequences. So first of all, as a consumer, you can't make the choice that you want to make if you want to decrease your impact. You're being lied to, and this has an impact on how much you trust the market. That's also valid for certification schemes. You look at labels and you don't even know whether they mean anything or not. And then this has impact on companies, especially those that are trying to make a difference and that do not get the market advantage that they should be allowed to get from doing these improvements, while companies that are not doing any work, not improving their processes, continue to pollute in much higher level than they should, say that they're not, and they get higher sales without doing the work. So these are real problems, and that's what the legislation is trying to address.
Right. Yeah, such an important piece of legislation, because I think we have all seen these 100% sustainable, green, whatever, and then it's impossible to even find what's behind it. Or if we can, it's not very credible. So let's see where this legislation takes us. So the EU processes, they can be confusing for the regular people and even for us here in Brussels sometimes. So can you walk us through what's the status between these different regulations, where they are at, what's decided, what's still to come, and when?
Okay, so there are three legislations we're going to talk about today. So the first one is the Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation. So it's a legislation that sets some requirements on what kind of packaging you can put on the market, new possibilities for reuse and refill, banning some single-use products, also explaining you how you should communicate about recycled content or recyclability and all of these sort of things. So it's really on packaging. So this one was adopted very recently this year. It is still to enter into force. We hope they will enter into force by the end of this year. So this is why it's written 2025 with a question mark. At the moment it enters into force, the clock starts ticking for implementation. The first obligations are set to come in 2027 for the refill obligations, which we can talk about later, and the year after for reuse obligations. So there's one more year. And then actually a lot of the requirements happen much later in time. So if it enters in application by the end of this year, it is only in 2030 that we'll see the single-use plastic bans enter in application. So you really have a lot of time to prepare for this. Now, moving to the ones on green claims and environmental claims towards consumers. So really talking at consumer claims, not B2B. There is one law which is called the Empowering Consumers in the Green Transition, which is a reform of an existing law, which is called the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. This directive tells you basically what information you have to provide consumers, especially at the point of sale. And it regulates a lot of marketing towards consumers. And what the Empowering Consumers Directive does is that it adds specific wording on environmental claims. Because before to regulate greenwashing, you had to do with more generic information, some guidelines from the Commission that was not really set into law. So Empowering Consumer really puts in the law environmental information. And this one has been adopted already this year in January. So it has already entered into force, I think in April. But because it's a directive, it now needs to be transposed into national legislation. So when the date for it to be to start applying to traders, so it is going to be transposed within 2 years from now. And in 2027 is really when the first anti-greenwashing measures will start to apply to trader. Then the third law is the Green Claims Directive, the one that most people are talking about. And this one, so Empowering Consumer tells you what you should not do to communicate to consumer. What is greenwashing, basically? The Green Claims Directive tells you how to make good information to consumers, how to make good claims. And so this one is actually still being negotiated. At the moment, the Commission has presented their proposal. The Parliament has presented their position on it. The Council will present their position on it actually in 2 weeks' time. And after that, the Council and the Parliament will have to sit together and negotiate the final deal. Because the elections are happening, this will happen only at the earliest in the fall this year. So we don't know if the law will be finalized by Christmas. It might not be. So here I put a final text adopted early 2025. That's what we're hoping for. It might be delayed a little bit. If it is adopted by early 2025, then the exact date of when it starts applying to trader are not set in stone. This is something that's up for negotiation. But what is in the text at the moment is that it should happen within 2-3 years. So 2027, 2028. So that gives you an idea of the timeline. It's not just immediately now, but you have a few years and you need to start preparing for it.
Great. Thank you for the explanations of those 3 pieces of legislation on the move here. 2 are kind of finished, but still to be put into national legislation, and 1 still on the go. But even if there is this transitional period, at least then businesses will know what they need to do. So there is time to prepare and time to do the right thing when the rules are clear. Great. So then moving on to the packaging and the rules there, it was quite a big discussions here in Brussels a couple of months ago when all of these negotiations and final decisions were happening. So finally, when we have at least a bit of clarity, what are the biggest changes in the packaging rules that are coming for HoReCa, for what we know at the moment.
Okay, so really here I'm going to focus on what is happening for the HoReCa industry. There are more aspects in the legislation, but I will not cover them today. There are two types of changes. The first one is reuse and refill. So the first obligation that's going to come in is an obligation for if you're serving some hot or cold beverage or food, and a consumer comes with their own box or their own mug, you should allow them to be served in this. So a lot of cafes are already doing this. Some might even offer a discount for it. But now this will become an obligation. You should not refuse the consumers if they come with their own mug, for example. The second one is reuse. So here, it's not about the consumer who comes in with their own container. It's the company that needs to offer a container that the consumer can bring back. So this is when you are providing beverages that you prepare yourself, so a coffee, or smoothie, something like that, or a food that you prepare yourself. So let's say you're preparing sandwiches, or you are a bakery and you are serving croissants that are not being packaged somewhere else, basically. So if you are getting delivered with the sandwiches prepackaged in plastic, this doesn't apply to you. But if you are preparing them on site and you have the option to actually not wrap them, then you should be providing consumers with, like serve them in a box that they can then bring back. So it's not their own, it's you who provide something that can be brought back. This obligation doesn't apply to everyone. The micro enterprises, so companies that have less than 10 people employed or who have a turnover of less than 2 million euros per year, these are exempted from this obligation. So it starts from SMEs and larger companies. And there is also, it's not an obligation at all, but by 2030, you should endeavor, it would be nice too, if you could provide at least 10% of your products in a reusable packaging. So this is for refill and reuse. And now the second main kind of changes are single-use plastic bans. So the idea, as you know, is to really get used to as much single-use plastic as we can, ideally all of it. And this law introduces some bans. So as I've said, they will only enter in application in 2030. So what I'm going to talk about now, I really, really encourage you to start working on this or before than what the law tells you to. The first one relates to if you are serving food or drinks on your premises. Let's say you're a cafe, you're a restaurant, even if you're hosted in a hotel or not, and you are serving food on site. You should not provide it in plastic cutlery, plastic mugs, plastic plates. You should provide the customers with real cutlery. So as used to be, basically. And there, so you have this, that's how you should provide these things. And the member states might exempt micro enterprises on a national basis. So you might want to check that if you're a micro enterprise, but otherwise it should apply to everyone. The second plastic ban is for all of these condiment, preserves, sauce, coffee creamers, sugar, salts that are currently being proposed in single-use sachet. Unless you are saying, like, unless you're selling a pre-packaged salad that has a little sauce plastic cup inside of it, unless it's that kind of thing, you should no longer provide these. You should really provide your sauce, your salt in containers that are bigger than a single use on your premises. So that means having a proper bottle of ketchup, not a little sachet. And the third one is, so let's say if you're a hotel and you are providing cosmetics, soaps, shampoo, and this sort of things in a little container or even in single-use portion with a plastic wrapping, this also will have to stop. You should provide it in regular size bottles that will remain most likely on the premises and that every customer will use as they come, instead of having all of these little elements that usually are thrown away if the customer, whether the customer has used them or not. So that's for the packaging obligations.
Yeah, so lots will change, lots of little things and lots of things that we are quite used to these days, like these little sachets that we're used to getting, sugars in coffee shops and things like that. Those will all be gone eventually, but of course, like it would be better to do it sooner rather than later. because there are many good examples already of hotels, restaurants, and cafes who are doing it, and their business is continuing otherwise as usual. So it might seem like a big change, but then in the end of the day, it might not be so painful in the end of the day to make those changes. So then, how to prepare for these changes, or is there any good examples that you can mention? If there is like HoReCa staff people on the line, like what kind of recommendations would you give to them?
So I think the main idea is that, so you have some time to implement them. Now, the truth is a lot of companies are already doing them and providing more comfort to their customers. So I really recommend that you start preparing for these changes now, especially those that might, you might have to change the way you procure items, for example. That might require a bit of work, a bit of looking for eventually new providers, or signifying to your provider that they should provide you with the items in a way that is according to the legislation. So I might change in the catalog of items. And then there are some that might require a bit more investment. So for example, if you are to provide reusable cutlery and you weren't before, that means that you might have to invest in a washing station. And so what is interesting there, the example that I have that was given by my colleague is a street food market in Paris. So it's the street food that is located on premises that they're not permanent. I think they were given a lot where they can have their markets, but one day this lot will be renovated into something else. So they're not there to stay for 10 years. They know they can't do a lot of investment in infrastructure because it's not going to be lasting forever. It's called the Ground Control Paris. So if any of you are in France and know about them. And what they did, so it's a lot of small vendors, like it's food trucks, essentially. And they don't have much resources one by one. And what they did is that they pulled the resources together so as to have one washing station for all the restaurants to use on the premises of this market. And that allows them to be a street food market with no single-use plastic. So it shows that even before there is any legal obligation, even if you're a very small vendor, if you're not on permanent ground, and in a city that is pretty expensive like Paris, you can make these changes. So really, we encourage you to basically start looking exactly what is in the regulation. I mentioned some exemptions, there might be others. For example, if you are selling ice cream on the beach and there's no access to drinking water, some exemptions might apply to you. So it really depends on what kind of business you're operating. Most people are going to be affected. So start already looking at what part of your operations are going to be affected. What do you need to change? What do you need to order that you were not ordering before? Do you need to have new equipment? Really start preparing now and look around. There are many examples. There might not be like one company that does it all, but you can find lots of small examples of one company doing this, another company doing that, and try and learn from others is really what I would encourage you to.
Great, thank you. And yeah, there are good examples around, and I know we have several of our zero waste mentors on the line, and there is very inspiring stories that they have managed to make happen on several of our projects. So if you have good links to share for the rest of the audience, like feel free to drop them also in the chat so others can be inspired by the good practices. I think seeing is believing, so seeing how it feels like would be the way forward. So then
we added the links to the street market on the chat.
Beautiful, thank you. So then, well, if there's some questions from the audience related to the packaging rules and what's going to change, there is still like time to drop them in the chat so we can go back to them. Just drop them there. But in the meantime, let's move on to green claims, and especially the bad kind of claims that are going to be banned. So we have a few examples here on the slide. Could you please explain what makes these bad claims and what's kind of the characteristics of a bad claim that will hopefully be banned soon?
Yeah. So the first one is a brewery that is also a bar in Brussels. I think that was a picture taken by a colleague. I think it's in Brussels. And there basically is their front door panel. And what it says at the bottom, which you might not be able to read, is we are carbon negative. No further information, no little asterisks, no nothing. So this is typically a vague, unsubstantiated claim. It's also unsubstantiated because there is no way a brewery can be carbon negative. It's actually unclear if they're making jokes because there is gas in their beers, or if they're actually serious about it. You have no information, you don't know what they're doing, and for sure, no company that is producing anything is carbon neutral. The second one is also a picture taken in Brussels by someone who works on how to make good marketing, actually. And this was on all the bus stops in Brussels for a while, and it's the main Belgium Airlines, Brussels Airline, that decided to make an ad where it's like, join us on our way to respectful flying. What is funny about that one is that it's not exactly a green claim. You don't know what they mean with respectful. Are they talking about the environment, customer service? You really don't know. And so the person who took the picture put a complaint to the court, to the consumer authorities in charge of it. And they confirmed that this ad was too vague to be meaningful and to not be misleading to consumers. So again, it's a case of a very vague advertisement. And the last one, so here I'm going to have to explain what it is, because not only is it too small, but it's also very fishy to understand what it's about. It says that this soap dispenser is 70% recovered coastal plastic. Let me be clear with you. There is no recovered coastal plastic in this soap dispenser. It was not made out of recovered coastal plastic. The why I know is because they refer to a plastic bank. That's the line above that you can't really read. A plastic bank, what they're doing is that they fund projects for recovering plastic in coastal areas in other places in the world, and ensuring that this plastic is either disposed of properly, recycled, or incinerated. So not all of it is recycled, and you can't know how much of it is recycled. And what they do is that they sell credits to companies like the one who makes the soap dispenser. So that company is making plastic-based soap dispenser, and they're pretending that they have compensated their production because they have contributed to funding to projects somewhere else in the world. There are two issues with these kind of things. One is that you haven't compensated your impact on the planet. Your plastic has been produced. And so this has already led to a lot of impact. And also these plastic, when they will be disposed of, and might enter the ocean. And this will create impact, even if it's collected later on by nice people picking trashes on the beach. And so you absolutely did not compensate anything. And then the other issue is that these credit markets are actually, for a lot of them, actual fraud. So we don't know, the projects that they claim to be funded might not exist, might not be doing anything, or there might just be no traceability as to what has happened to the plastic later on. The biggest issue is really claiming you have compensated your action. If these projects are really happening, this is great. That they are being funded by other companies, this is great. But this does not remove any of your action. So we have here 3 examples of claims. The main issue is that they're vague, that there is no further information. The last one, you can make some research and find some information. The problem is that this information is misleading. So this is what is the legislation is going to try to address.
These stories behind these claims, they sound so that like, how are people even, how they have the bravery to make these kind of claims that have like nothing behind them? And it's also very, very difficult for the consumer to know, because otherwise we would be there in the supermarkets Googling like crazy, and our like weekly shopping would take hours to discover all of this. So they're really playing on our busy lives and lack of time to really discover everything that's on the background. And I guess that's one of the reasons why we really need proper regulation so that they wouldn't play with these kind of things. So we touched a little bit on it earlier, like what's the status of the legislation on the greenwashing and where is it at? So what can we expect to change based on what we know at the moment, knowing that one part of the legislation is already decided and the Green Claims Directive is still in the works? So what can we expect to change? and when, and what's still up in the air?
Okay, so the first part I'm going to talk about is, so this first legislation that has already been adopted, so we know this is set in stone. The details might change a little bit in transposition, but basically the Empowering Consumers in the Green Transition Directive looks at what companies should not be doing. So practices that are considered misleading and even misleading at all times. So no matter what is the information. So not already what is written there. This is going to be about the Green Claims Directive. But then the Empowering Consumer bans a number of things. The main thing it bans is unsubstantiated and generic environmental claims. So when you're saying, I'm climate friendly, I'm good for the planet, but you're not saying anything else, this is vague, this is generic, this is unsubstantiated, this should not be done. So if you have any of your marketing flyers, posters, products that say something like this, you need to get ready to remove them immediately. Again, this legislation has already entered into force, so they will not start controlling already, but you might already have issues with this. So I think that is generic. The other big change is, so for example, I talked about the plastic credits. So the plastic credits are not addressed in the legislation, sadly. But one thing that is being addressed is carbon neutrality. When it comes to your product, so let's say if you look at the ad before and they said that they as a company are carbon neutral, fair enough. Problematic, but not banned. What is banned is if they had said our beers are carbon neutral. If you are making a claim on the product itself, you cannot use these credits to claim any compensation or offsetting if these credits are about carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions. So you will no longer see a carbon neutral flight, for example. And there are lots of examples in the press about this. So these are claims that are already being addressed by courts, even with the current legislation. But now the difference that is really set in stone in the legislation, you should not be doing this. Another very interesting ban that is being introduced is related to certification schemes. So there are a lot of certification schemes in the tourism industry, so this is going to be important. A lot of these labels that you see everywhere are actually not verified by someone independent. Some of the labels are being created by the company themselves to put on their own product. These kinds of labels will be forbidden. So they should, all these, anything that looks like a label that has no independent third-party verifying certification schemes behind it will no longer be allowed. So same thing, for example, if it's your industrial branch that creates a label for its own members, but there is no independent verification, and also if it's not open to other traders outside of that association, this will be forbidden as well. So really, certification schemes need to be transparent. They need to be open to any trader who wants to apply if they meet the criteria. And they need to have a system of verification that ensures that it is independent, that it is third-party done, basically. So these are the rules set in the Empowering Consumer, and in the Green Claims Directive, there will be further details on this, on exactly how to implement it. But that means that there's a lot of labels and certification schemes that are just going to disappear from the market. And this is great news, because it means that the one that you will actually see are real certification schemes that are really assessing environmental credentials of companies and products. So things like the eco-labels, like the proper eco-labels, like the EU eco-labels, the Nordics one, or the Blue Angels and these sort of things, these ones will finally get the recognition, like more recognition. I mean, these are very famous, but even like smaller ones done maybe at other national labels that are less well known, or private labels that are doing a good job but are not so well known, these ones will finally get a bit more recognition. And all the ones that have really nothing behind them will disappear. So I think these are the main elements in the Empowering Consumers Directive. It also has elements about information that you need to provide to consumers. So for example, if you are selling products to consumers, you might as well go and check the details. They put some more requirements on making sure customers are aware about the warranty and this sort of things. So don't hesitate to have a look. And again, so this has entered into force, it will really start hitting in the industry in 2027. So right now, what I'm thinking is that we're going to see, so all these things that are banned are going to progressively disappear as people update their marketing material. By 2027, they should really not be there anymore. If they are, then I hope the market authorities will do a good job at addressing these issues. Unfortunately, my market authorities have very little resources. So that's why we're looking at the Green Claims Directive, which I'm not going to talk about. So again, this one is under negotiation. So a lot might change, but these are the main elements. I put there what is in the proposal from the Commission, because that we have and it's final. Obviously, the final deal will have to wait for the end of the year. So the Green Claims Directive is really about how can you make claims that are good and that you will not get prosecuted ever for greenwashing. So the first thing is that it provides key rules on substantiation and communication. So what kind of information do you need to provide a customer? So for example, the fact that you will need to gather, so that is something important for people who want to make claims, and I've not really put much effort in it at the moment, that you will really have to find the data behind your claims. You should be able to demonstrate that your claim is relevant from the life cycle perspective. So for example, let's say for a flight, making claims about serving coffee in paper cups is absolutely not relevant from the life cycle perspective. What is relevant is the fuel that you are using in your planes. So typically there are lots of claims that might no longer be very relevant. You really need to make claims about what is relevant. So if you're a hotel and your only claim is about not providing paper cup, for example, or not always washing your towels, you might have to do a proper investigation on whether your water and energy use from washing the towels is your main impact. If it is, then by all means make this claim. But if there are other things that you need to address, for example, you're operating a spa on your premises and this is using a lot of water energy, maybe the towel are not, like, it's still a significant impact, but maybe it's not the most significant one. So really you should make claim about things that are significant. And you should not hide any trade-offs. And you should disclose what kind of methodology that you have used and what was the data behind, whether it's your own data or if you're using data from your industry, like average data, which is often the case because a lot of people do not have their primary data, they're not measuring it. So all of that will have to be disclosed. And especially a lot more information will have to be provided to customers. So for example, you might make your claim in a one catchy sentence, that's still okay. But you need to provide supportive information that consumers can understand. So it might be on your website, or it might be already on the packaging if there's enough room and if the explanation fits there. And the exact detail of what will have to be on packaging and internet will come later. That we don't know exactly. Same thing if you want to make comparisons, whether you want to compare with your previous process or products, or if you want to compare with the industry average or with a competitor, this comparison has to be fair. So you have some rules on how to ensure that it's fair. Then there's another part of the legislation, which is again on labels, on certification schemes. So the idea there is to just have some implementing measures on, so I said they have to be open, to be transparent, and to have independent verification. So you have some more rules on this. And another element is that because we have several hundreds of environmental labels on the market, the Commission wants to address the proliferation and so make sure that any new label that's created actually adds value. Exact details on how they're going to do that will come later. I also added aggregated scoring there because the Commission wants to ban them. One thing that is interesting with this is that customers keep on asking for scores. They love an A, B, C, D, or golden, bronze, silver. The problem is they are extremely misleading. Like, what is behind this A, what is behind this B is usually not disclosed. And the problem is when you have, let's say, two certification schemes assessing the same product for the same environmental aspect and resulting in different scoring because they've used different methodology. So the idea behind this ban, we need to see whether it survives the negotiation. It's not sure. The Parliament did not want it. is the Commission basically wants to harmonize and have some EU level methodologies, maybe national methodologies, but having every single certification coming up with their own score might no longer be allowed. So also something to watch for. And finally, so now you have the rules on how to make claim, you have the rules on what you need to communicate to consumers. But the situation we have now is you make your claim, you put it on the market. If you're very, very unlucky, a market authority might check it and find that it is not following the law, and you might get into trouble. The problem with this is that most greenwashing actually never gets caught because the market authorities do not have the resources to address this. So what the Green Claims Directive proposes to introduce is a verification by independent and accredited verifiers before you make your claim on the market. So for labeling schemes, that is probably going to be a one-off authorization. You might need to renew it every 5 years or something. But for claims, it's every single claim you make will have to be verified and certified. The good thing for companies is that this gives you legal certainty, because once you have the certificate of conformity, you know you are conform to the Green Claims Directive. You might still have issues with the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, because obviously these are two different directives. The Unfair Commercial Practice goes way beyond than just the environment. So you can't have a certificate of conformity for this. But at least on the Green Claims Directive, you know you will not have issues. So it's really is a security for companies. It might also be a learning experience if they're not sure about the claims they're doing. So we hope this will remain strong in the legislation despite the negotiations trying to water it down a little. This is really a key provision of the directive. This is the game changer. So this is very important. And another last final element, the council might get rid of it. Let's see. The Commission proposed a number of sanctions because the problem we have right now is that you have consumer authorities that sometimes prosecute some greenwashing, but the main way they act is they just mention it to the company, tell the company to change, but they don't get fined. Excuse me. So the incentive to greenwash is even higher because you know you're not going to get sanctioned. Voilà, and I think I'm done.
Great, thank you for the very thorough explanation of the key points from both of the directives. And at least what I heard between the lines is that there will be much more need for data, numbers behind claims, what you're doing. It needs to be based on something and something more structured than before. And then also the fact that you need to verify what you are saying before you say it, and not like you do it these days where you can say whatever you want and worry about the consequences if it comes to that. There's a question from the audience from Luxembourg. There is a government scheme there, a label for tourism, and it's coordinated by them, and they have independent auditors. Is there a way to check if that label is accepted, or what would be the way for current label operators to find out, are they going to be one of those labels that will survive the new legislation or not?
So this is a really good question, and I will not have an easy answer for you. So what you can check already is the text in the Empowering Consumers Directive. If you are a publicly owned scheme, if you are third-party verified and you are open to any trader, normally you're off the hook. This is good for you. When it comes to the Green Claims Directive, it really depends on the results of the negotiation. The council is very much pushing for all the publicly owned, at least at the national level, schemes to, they will not have any issue with added value, for example. Anyway, if they're existing, it should be okay. I think as long as you're third-party verified, you have less risk of having any issue. Now, it's a bit the issue with the Green Claims Directive that you have the general IDs, but a lot of the details will come in implementing act or delegated act. So I know that the exact authorization procedure, we don't have the details yet. So if you want to get prepared, I would say, yeah, verify whether that scheme, for the people who are operating the scheme, check what is in the text at the moment, what is being negotiated. Check also if you have access to the people working on the files in the ministry. With what you've described, I think it should be okay. But again, it really depends on the situation. But you will most likely you will have to wait for 2025 to know exactly what is going to happen. Someone who is using the certificate or that certification schemes, reach out to them, I would say.
Good. So still some negotiations to do before we have definite answers. What about these schemes that already have this silver, gold, platinum, or 1, 2, 3 star thing? How would they need to maybe adjust their methodology, or how can they become compliant with the current legislation, understanding that there might be a solid methodology behind it? How do you get to bronze level so it's like a transparent method to do so?
So it can go two ways. Either the ban remains in the legislation, and then we can talk about that, or the ban is out of the legislation and nothing changes for you. If the ban is in the legislation, I think you should move to a system where there is no scoring displayed on the label. You might use an internal scoring. So for example, I've heard from certification schemes saying that having a gold, silver, bronze was a way of encouraging companies to improve. And so already bronze may be at a pretty high level, but to make sure that they keep on improving, you have silver, you have gold, and that's a bit of a motivation. What I would say is that this is something you can keep internally, but honestly, communicating that to consumers is misleading. What I've seen a lot, the brand is that it's not just what you're doing and whether your methodology is super strong behind. The problem is that we see a lot of schemes that are not clear about this. You have schemes where you can say that you're gold without disclosing that there is a platinum level. So you think you're the best, but you're really not the best even within the scheme. Or you have somewhere the bronze level is you just apply to the scheme. You haven't really fulfilled any criteria, or you have just some plans to one day. So the problem is it's really made from the point of view of the consumer and what they see on the market. And they see all of this proliferation of schemes and gradings that mean everything and anything and nothing. So that's really what the legislation is trying to address. I think it's a bit of a pity for schemes that really put a lot of work in developing methodologies, but I'm afraid they're going to have to be the victim of just trying to solve this issue. It's a bit of a pity, but that's how bad it is at the moment that we need to sacrifice them. Now, the goal of the Commission is not to get rid of any scoring, but to have some harmonized methodology in the law, like they're doing, for example, in mandatory labeling, like the energy labeling. It might still be voluntary labeling. I think we really need to have this distinction in mind. Some labeling is voluntary, some is mandatory. Here we're only covering the voluntary ones, so not the energy labeling, but things more like the EU Eco label. And if you have developed a very strong methodology, then get in touch with the people who are going to develop this legislation. Get involved there and put your expertise there so it doesn't all go to waste. But this might be an evolution that we're going to see in the market.
Great, thank you for the very thorough answers. So the negotiations continue and we'll see how it goes. There's one example also from the chat about the French claim about 100% PET recycled material, if my French serves me, and that's not guaranteed. And it's claiming to be green, environmental friendly plastic. What would you think about this kind of claim? What's good about it? What's bad about it? Is it even going to survive the legislation? It's for a drinks bottle made out of plastic.
Yeah, so the first question I will ask, and this is actually really problematic type of claim that we see everywhere, when they say it's 100% recycled, do they mean the bottle? Do they also mean the cap? Because very often the cap is not recycled. It's only the bottle. Or what about the label on it? Or if it's not just printed directly and you have a plastic label, as we see on plastic bottle. Like very often these claims are misleading. So interestingly, this is something I have not mentioned, but the Green Claims Directive will apply only if there are no other legislation that puts some requirements on this. And it so happened that the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, which a regulation which we're talking about just before, has some mentions on how to make recycled content claims. So they are out of the legislation. There will be no verification for these because this is not provided for in the Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation. So for these ones, actually, they will be regulated under the Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation. And the big issue we have with this is how are you going to measure the recycled content? Because actually, now you can be almost certain that no bottle of cosmetics on the market is made of 100% recycled plastic, even if they claim so. Because usually what they do is that instead of putting 100% recycled content, they assign the number to that product. So using a methodology that is called mass balance, which some of you might be familiar with, whereby if you're using it in an unproportionate way, basically you are putting, let's say, 50% recycled plastic content in your production process, in your manufacturing site. But instead of saying that all the bottles are 50% recycled content, there's half of your production where you're gonna not say anything, not claim anything, and half of the production where you're gonna claim it's 100% recycled. And usually this is what happens. So when you see 100% recycled content, check for the fine line. Most likely you will not find them, but if you find them, I can bet you this is not made of 100% recycled content. So this is really the issue that we have with these kind of claims. And there, when they say that you are looking upon the planet, I don't want to be vulgar, so I will not say it, but this is not okay. This is just not true. At the end of the day, this is plastic, and that plastic has been produced one day, and you have had to recycle it. You had to go through an entire manufacturing process where a lot of that resource was lost in the process. Like, this is about recycled content, but 100% recyclability, for example, is not true either, because when you recycle plastic, you have losses. So these claims are just misleading. Now, whether the legislation is going to put a stop to them, probably not. This is unfortunately not the direction we're taking, but we really need to keep saying it, that this is not true and this is misleading to consumers, whether the law recognizes it or not.
Great, thank you. Then let's move on. We have talked about in terms of green claims, lots what you can and can't do in the future, but who needs to take these things into consideration? We spoke a little bit earlier about these like certification scheme operators, but then what about the businesses themselves? Like, do these regulations apply to everybody, or is there some thresholds and maybe loops for businesses to not have to apply these rules?
So yes, there are some thresholds. When it comes to the empowering consumers, so the one that revised the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, this applies to everyone. So any company that is making a marketing communication to a consumer in the context of selling something. So this applies without any threshold. But when it comes to the Green Claims Directive, the idea is that micro enterprises can opt in. So they do not have to follow the legislation. Now, if they want to, if they have the resources to do so, they can, and they will get the certificate of conformity that I was talking about. So you don't have to, but you can. Otherwise, it applies to everyone else, and the legal basis is the same as Green Claims Directive is lex specialist of the unfair commercial practices. So the legal basis is the same. So it's the same kind of scope in terms of whether as a business this concerns you or not, is when you're a business and when you are communicating towards consumers for the point of selling something.
Great. So only towards consumers. So can then B2B businesses greenwash as much as they want, or how does those transactions work?
I kind of want to say yes. I mean, no, I think, so the UCPD applies to in B2C. There's an equivalent in B2B settings, but I'm not familiar with it, and I don't think it's really looking at the environmental aspects. The Green Claims Directive, especially with the amendments that are coming in, will be very clearly only about consumers, not about businesses. So yeah, this remains a bit of a loophole. What we're expecting is that in the future, there might be further legislation to tackle the B2B angle. I would say if you are selling also in the B2B context, you might as well just harmonize so it's simpler for you. If you are a business who procures items, you are not necessarily protected by this law. But what I encourage you to do is, if you have that kind of negotiating power, is to ask to be served with the same level of protection as a consumer, to have access to the data, to have access to the methodology, to be properly informed about what it is that you are buying. And in terms of like judicial protection, whether if you go to court against greenwashing, whether you're going to win, I don't know. I hope that the jurisprudence will be on your side there, but the law is really about business to consumers.
Yeah. So still, businesses who procure things from other businesses, they need to be careful about greenwashing, even after all of this has been transposed and taken into action.
There might be more information available, but that's about it.
Yeah. Good. So the small businesses, they were exempt to have to apply these rules. But how would you see it in the context of the smallest businesses? Should they still apply for the same level of rules, or could they get it down from the supply chains that bigger businesses are forcing them to comply? And how can even small business do if they want to comply with the new rules to be on the same level? Because it is a lot of work to get a solid green claim together.
So it's really micro enterprises that are exempted. So if you have less than 10 staff, so it's a fairly small. If you're operating with more than 10 employees and your turnover is above 2 million euros per year, then you are indeed a small or medium company or even beyond. So the rule applies to you. What I would say is you can already check what is the Empowering Consumers Directive text. You should wait for transposition in your national law to be really, really certain, legally speaking. But I think it's quite self-explanatory already what is in there. We're not expecting too many surprises in transposition. So you can already check that. And that's really going to be about, so review what all your marketing material and check, am I doing anything that is going to be banned in 2 years? Because then that means you need to update all of your marketing, and that might take some time. But what you can already check is anything wrong? And especially, I think in the tourism industry, we see a lot of these labels that are not really labels. So if you have one of these, you can already get rid of it. If it's about you want to make the green claims properly and you really want to know how you can make the substantiation properly, you might have to wait a little bit to know exactly what the legislation is going to say. So that also includes disaggregated scoring. We don't know if that's going to stay or not. So you might want to wait a little, but what you can already start doing is, so look at the claims you want to make, look at the data that you have, and if you're missing data, if you realize you're not able to substantiate, for example, when I said it has to be relevant from a life cycle perspective, and you realize you don't have any way to really prove that, then maybe you already need to commission these studies, do these kind of energy audits or whatever it is that you can use. And especially if you're a small or medium company and you don't have much resources, this might mean finding a service provider that can do these studies for you. Or you might also look whether there is some public support. What the Green Claims Directive says is that the European Union and the member states must provide some support to companies in terms of training, access to resources, to data, and this sort of thing. So these will come in the future, but there might already be some available for you. So you might want to check that. I think it's really, you might not know exactly how you're going to have to change the exact wording of your claim, but you can already start looking for the information that you're going to need. And if you are using a certification, I would say reach out to that certification scheme. If you're unsure whether they're going to make the cut, They might not be certain yet either, so maybe don't go harassing them already. But these certification schemes need to start reviewing their processes, whether they're going to make the cut or not. I think the most established one should be fine. The idea is not to get rid of all of them, but really to protect the good ones. You might also, if you're not using a certification schemes already and realize that making claims is going to become too much for you, you might want to join a certification. So you might already start looking for a good one. So in that case, in your search for a new one, really look at what the criteria are. So openness, transparency, third-party verification. If you see that this is missing, look for another one.
Great tips. And starting with the data, there is a good couple of years to get started on that. It takes a while. And we have actually a webinar coming up on the 19th of September about gathering data, leading with data. In our context, of course, as the Mission Zero Academy, related to waste-related data and how to go about that. So that could be a good starting point to start thinking how to do this data collection in the future. So then we touched upon this already, but some tips. How can companies make acceptable green claims in the future? And what are the keys to success? How to do it?
So I would say the first thing is really see environmental claims as environmental information, not so much as marketing. It doesn't matter whether you use it as marketing, but it's just that thinking of it this way will put you in the right state of mind to actually find the right kind of information. It's not so much about the catchy sentence you're going to make. Most likely your capacity to make a catchy sentence is going to decrease. So if you're working mostly with your marketing team or with marketing staff, consider really hiring or procuring some experts who are really about environmental management. They will help you really prepare for this. Then it's really environmental claims is the last thing you do in your sustainability journey. What you need to focus on is really improving your processes. So that relates back to what we're saying about the packaging and packaging waste regulation. So all these changes in the way you operate and what you sell and how you produce and this sort of things. This is really the first thing you should focus on. Claims come after. I mean, you can start making claim already a bit on the go, you to explain that you are in this process. In that case, you need to be very clear what it is that you are looking at, what it is that you're implementing. And so actually something that is in the Empowering Consumers Directive is also, if you want to make a claim about the future of your performance, say by 2050, I will have reduced my emissions by 50%. You need to have a plan that is detailed. You need to have a budget. You need to have someone independent who is monitoring your progress. Because the problem is that we've seen a lot of people saying that in the future they will do something to just remove their plan a year later because they figured that they can't do it, or that they no longer getting any sale benefit from doing this. So really, you can talk about your progress. You should really talk about everything. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about what you're not doing and why. Talk about what is the reasonable expectations. Like if you look at claims at the moment, it looks like everything is sustainable. We'll solve this issue. The climate is not changing anymore. There is no biodiversity crisis. All the chemicals are wonderful and good for your health. This is not what environmental claims should be about. At the end of the day, nobody's sustainable. So don't say that you are sustainable. Say that you are trying to improve and focus really on what it is that you are doing. So this is something that you can already communicate and that you can already work on even before the law is in application. Some companies are doing it, and I find that this is the most honest way of showing your progress. Then when you need to focus on your improvements, so I've already talked about how they need to be relevant. So really focus on what matters. Don't do something cosmetic just for the purpose of making an environmental claim. It will backlash. It doesn't make you look better. I remember a few years ago when circular was really the key word. I was going to cafes and you had on the billboard written big, we're circular. You had no idea what they were doing. And then here you were holding a paper cup. I was like, I'm in a cafe. I want a proper mug in porcelain, you know? And so don't communicate just for the sake of communicating and doing what everybody else is doing. I think we really had this issue that everybody was making claims. And so businesses felt that if they wanted to stay in the game, they had to make claims. And we really need to stop that wave. And I think that's what's going to happen with this legislation. So some companies are now being wary of what they call greenwashing. I think it's not that. It's if you are not sure whether you've done enough, or if you don't have the data, if your improvement isn't really significant, it's not worth creating a system where everybody has to say something no matter how bad it is. Just don't say anything. And keep on working on improving your processes. And once you have something good, then you can communicate on it. So that's also what is presented on the slide, are what ECOS recommend to make good claims. This is based, for example, on guidelines from UNEP. So UNEP has these guidelines in sustainability communications that are really good. They're not necessarily going to be enough to follow the legislation, but they're a very good place to start. And so the idea is that your claims have to be relevant. You talk about what matters. You don't hide any significant hotspots. They need to be reliable. That's why we insist on third-party verification, and we're very happy to see that put in the law. No matter how honest and sincere you are, we simply cannot take your word for it in today's world. This is really sad, but this is the situation. So really make sure that everything you say is accurate and scientifically true. And as much as you can already now, look for certification if that is possible. Otherwise, wait for the law to have a certification verification procedure. This is good as well, but really, when I see a claim and there is no third-party verification, I just don't believe it. I can't. Then clarity, and this is really about how you communicate to consumers. There is a bit of balance to find between saying something that's gonna fit in your packaging, that is indeed going to attract attention, and that is understandable by consumers who, by and large, do not know, do not have the time, might not care so much. It really depends. But when you're making environmental claims, what comes out of scientific research is actually that there is a role for educating consumers. We should not underestimate how little most people understand about lots of claims. I mean, this is my bread and butter. I always loved looking at labels since I was a kid, because that's the kind of geek I am. Even there are many claims I do not understand. So you should not expect consumers to understand everything. And so what you can do, and what is usually being proposed, even in standardization, is you have your tagline. This is really your claim. Then right next to it, or on the packaging, you have a short paragraph that gives a bit more information. And then on your website, don't hesitate to put the supporting information. Some very keen consumers might look at it, but the people who are most likely to look at it are civil society organizations and researchers. So, and also market authorities if they want to check your claims. So it's good to make it available for them so you don't get into trouble. But provide really like the details of your studies, what you've done, how you have measured, what standards you're following, or these sort of things like that. You can put on your website, not directly on the packaging, but it also that way we know that you've done your work.
Great. And we have touched a few times upon marketing and marketing agencies, because they are sometimes behind these totally misleading green claims. What kind of things should marketing agencies take into consideration? And if you're a company, what kind of things to look out for when you purchase marketing services?
So the truth is, we should not expect marketing specialists to know how to make good green claim, simply because it is not their job. I think when we're moving toward now is claims that are made both with people with a look on an eye for marketing, so making things catchy, which is their job, and people who know what environmental information is, so environmental experts. And that's actually what large companies are doing right now. For example, we had discussions with Sony, so PlayStation and this sort of things. What they do when they make claims, that's both the the corporate sustainability staff and the marketing staff that work together. And so if you are, let's say, a small company, you don't have these big departments, obviously, with you. What we see more and more are consultancies that provide this kind of environmental information services. Some of them are also training marketing agencies. So what I would suggest is don't just ask marketing people. Most likely they won't know enough. It's not how they think. It's not really the core of their job. So really don't rely only on them. You might as well not rely on them at all and rely only on environmental specialists. If you do want to have a marketing spin on things, look for a marketing agency that is specialized on environmental claim and check what they're doing. And really, if look at this slide, take it as a checklist. Are they following this? Are they creating marketing documents that actually follow all these criteria? Check it against the law as well. Or look at the UNEP guideline. Check against it. Are they likely to provide you with marketing services that fit this? And when you are discussing with them, really talk about it. Say, I want something, there won't be any greenwashing. Because I think it's not their core job. I don't think they can really, unless they start hiring a lot of environmental specialists, I think they're gonna have to learn how to work with environmental experts. And there's going to be a lot of education on their side as well to come in the years to come. So don't hesitate to push them in that direction.
Great, great answer. Thank you for that. There's a question in the chat going a bit backwards in what kind of claims will be banned or not banned, or how to communicate about it, about climate. I'm talking specifically about compensation. You mentioned earlier that carbon neutrality will be a complicated claim to make in the future. What about compensation? How to address that in the light of these new rules?
So there's two cases. If you want to talk about compensation of greenhouse gas emission for your product, this is banned. This is 100% clear forbidden from now on. 2 years before the market authorities actually check this, but that's what the laws say. When it is about the product, so whether it's a flight, whether it's a banana, whether it's a hotel, so these are banned. Now, when it comes to the company, so at the company level, let's say it is Shell or Total, or it's the Marriott Hotel Corporation. So really, when it's the traders entity, they are not banned. We as ECOS strongly regret this, because the use of credits for compensation is scientifically bonkers. You are never compensating anything. What you are doing is that you are contributing to projects where they might be planting trees, restoring habitats, this sort of things, which is very nice if they are actually doing it, and this is actually true, which is not always the case. But it's really nice to be contributing. And we think this is what companies should be doing. Say that they contribute, not that they compensate their own impact, because essentially they're not. But what the law says, so empowering consumer doesn't talk about the trader level, only talk about the product level. The Green Claims Directive is going to address the traders level. What they propose is that you can say, I'm carbon neutral, small line underneath that says, because I have offsetted 50% of my emissions and reduced 50% of my emissions myself. So what you will see on packaging is this breakdown. It has to be on packaging. Now, exactly what kind of credits you can use, this is being negotiated. And how much credit you can use is also being negotiated. If we're looking at the latest draft from the council, you could very well offset 100% of your emissions, which would be extremely misleading, but legal. If you look at what the parliament has proposed, it would be only your residual emissions. There is no legal definition for residual emissions, but if we look at texts such as on corporate reporting, so ESRD, CSRD, and these kind of acronyms, if you're familiar with them, but it's corporate reporting for sustainability, they have mentions such as 10%. We still consider this to be misleading at ECOS, and many other NGOs consider this to be the case. So from our side, really do not ever claim any compensation. From the legal side, most likely you will be authorized to do it, but exactly what credit and how many credit, this still needs to be decided in the law.
Great.
It's only about carbon emissions. So plastic credits, textile credits, biodiversity credits, these are not addressed, unfortunately. So this is a gray area. You might still get into trouble.
Great. We're coming slowly towards the end. If you have any more questions to Margaux about any of these new rules or regulations, now would be a good time to start typing them into the chat, so we have still time to get some answers. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for that to happen, in your view, what would be, like, if the participants leave here with 3 things to remember, what would be them to remember? Because we have covered a lot of territory and a lot of detail. And also, what are your top tips for successful implementation of all these new rules?
So when it comes to packaging and packaging waste regulation, what we've seen is that they're only going to apply it in a very long time. There are many exemptions, and they're not very ambitious in the end. So really, the one thing that I'd like the audience to remember is a lot of these actions are not so complicated to do. A lot of companies are already doing them. We really encourage you, especially if you want to remain a front runner, to go beyond what is in the legislation and really look to ban any single-use item and really focus on anything that can be reused and stay longer in use and really reduce your consumption. When it comes to green claims, really the idea is to move from a world where you could just say whatever you wanted to say because you felt a bit pressured to say something before your competitors get the market. So really get serious about it. Think of it as environmental information, not as marketing, and get support. Most likely get help, because I think there's a lot of green claims that are being made that are just done because people don't know how to do it properly. So get some support, wait for the legislation to be finalized. It's going to be a very steep learning curve, but as long as all companies get together to do this, and I see a lot of initiatives also in the private sector, so do be serious about it. So top tips for successful implementation: do not wait for these laws to get into application and to be prosecuted or anything. Start working on it now. Already look at what is the information you have, what is the information that's missing, what kind of changes do you need to make in terms of staff, equipment, procurement, and this sort of things. Really do not wait for the last minute.
Great, thank you. And what would be your hopes for still in the upcoming negotiations, and what would be the best outcome for you that you would like to see happen?
The best outcome for us would be that A, the legislation passed. B, it is not watered down. So we have a proper verification system before claims are being put on the market. For me, this is really what's going to change the landscape. C, that a number of very problematic claims are finally being banned. We have low hope for this, but if there is any chance to still push to ban offsetting credits, whether it's for carbon emission, plastic, biodiversity, that would be amazing. And when it comes to contents, such as recycled content, bio-based content, and all these kind of like sustainable content claims that we see a lot of in products, we would really like that the methodologies that are the most misleading, like unproportional allocation of credits is banned. But even if it's not, that at least the consumers are informed right on the claim that this is what has happened. So, for example, I'm 100% made of recycled content, but not really. This might not be true. There might only be a residual amount of recycled content in this bottle. I want that sentence to be written there. We see it from some certification schemes that are encouraging companies to say that. It's not great, but if that's how good we can go, that would be amazing.
Great. And you, of course, work on making this happen on a daily basis, and we wish you the best of luck for that. But then we have also very active participants in the audience who are wondering what can they do to help as private citizens, as professionals, maybe in the field of environment, or civil society members. Like, what can they do to help make all of this happen?
So the situation we have now is that the council is finalizing the position. I mean, they have finalized, they will announce it in a couple of weeks. I feel that talking with permanent representation was a lot harder than in the past. While the industry really, I feel like they had more access. So we're really in the situation where we managed to strengthen the text in the Parliament's version. The council version is not going to be that great from an environmental perspective. Now, the elections are coming. There's going to be a few more months before the negotiation starts again. And the sad thing is that the negotiating team on the Parliament side is going to change entirely, because both rapporteurs are not representing again for election. So it will be a new team. We have two negotiators from the Parliament, from IMCO and ENVI. So we're gonna have to train them and explain and hope that they support what was adopted by the previous legislature, and even go beyond if possibly. We're gonna have to face a council that's not very that's not really pro verification, that has no issue with offsetting claims, that doesn't want all the information to be provided to consumers. They put a lot of things as on demand or not mandatory instead of mandatory and publicly available. They removed the whole pardon sanctions, most likely. So, you know, there's going to be a lot to fight for in the trialogue version. So what we aim to do is to put a lot more public pressure, and we hope to get support in that. So with the other environmental NGOs, we hope to put forward more things out there. And I think we're really going to have to be talking very loud on this, because what we see, so when I was talking about offsetting credits, last year, there was a lot of backlash on all these credit markets, saying how bad they were and how they don't function. In the past few months, these credit markets have ramped up PR, and now they're convincing everyone that they have solved all of their issues and that everything is functioning perfectly well, and that all these investigations were misguided. So we really, really need to keep on putting the pressure and reminding policymakers that offsetting is not a real thing. You're giving money, you're contributing to projects, but you are not compensating anything. And so, yeah, we hope that you will help us with being very vocal about this and make sure that the text is protected.
Great. Thank you very much for that. We will also share after this webinar some resources that ECOS have very kindly made available for us. So there is hopefully a bit more facts and figures and things to make these talking points and feel more confident to speak about these issues. Of course, these points that you have shared, they are already great, and I think they give the key points to talk. There's one more question in the chat about the packaging and packaging waste regulation and the like the statements on recyclability.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any more understanding of how are those claims or requirements around recyclability going to be defined? And then in relation to plastic films,
Yeah.
to be able to make like decisions on products now, how is it possible to move away from plastic films, which seem to be quite problematic products? Do you have any ideas on how to do that?
So unfortunately, this is not my field, so I will not be able to answer that question. But what I recommend is that you contact my colleague, Matthias Falkenberg, who is really our expert on the PPWR and all the plastic things. So he should be able to tell you maybe if we know more about so I don't know if the discussions on the methodology have started, but he should be able to inform you on this. So Matthias Falkenberg at ECOS.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you very much.
Yes,
I think that, yeah, we are seems to be running out of questions in the chat. There is a question about the name.
I'm writing this right up.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. So yeah, if there is no more questions, now is really the final moments. Otherwise, we can start slowly closing. We have recorded this webinar, so if you want to come back to this, check details, it will be available on our website very soon, and we will come back to you with the resources, with the with the reports that we have to help you keep learning about these topics. And of course, we welcome you to follow the work that ECOS is doing on the topic, because the work is great, and we are really looking forward to seeing the results that are going to come. And other than that, we welcome you to join our next webinar, so on the 19th of September, and then we are talking about data and how to deal with data and start collecting that data to make proper green claims in the future. So thank you very much, Margaux, for your expertise and your participation. It's been great to hear from you. And also thank you very much for the audience to join and to contribute and even offer to help in the fight. So thank you very much, and we'll hope to see you soon.
Yeah, and thank you again for the invitation.
No worries. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.